Pregnant wife confronts millionaire husband's mistress at their secret getaway. They say a single secret can shatter an entire world. In the elegant hush of an afternoon tea room, Emma Carlyle felt her heart thunder with dread. She was almost 8 months pregnant, her hand trembling over the phone that refused to stop buzzing. Another cryptic text from her husband, Lucas, and something inside her said tonight was the night she would finally discover his darkest secret. Little did she know, the truth would unfold in a luxurious hideaway, hidden behind veils of wealth and influence. But sometimes, money can't shield anyone from the devastating consequences of betrayal or the sweet, inescapable touch of karma. Emma Carlyle had never been the type to eavesdrop on her husband's phone calls. She was the trusting kind, the sort of person who believed her love story was unbreakable. After all, Lucas Carlyle was the man who had swept her off her feet with grand gestures, poetic confessions, and a ring that sparkled like starlight. When they married, she had felt as though she'd been plucked from an ordinary life and placed on a gilded pedestal. She moved from her modest home in Cleveland to Lucas's penthouse in Manhattan. A panoramic view of the city's skyline served as their daily backdrop. But suspicion has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. It began as a small voice in her head that questioned the odd hours Lucas worked, the business trips that seemed to stretch a little longer. Each time, the credit card statements with puzzling expenses from lavish hotels she'd never heard of. Emma brushed off those thoughts, telling herself that it must be part of Lucas's new entrepreneurial venture, a tech startup that had soared in value almost overnight, turning him into a millionaire before he turned 30. Yet, each time Emma tried to reach out to him, there was a sense of distance, a coolness in his responses. He looked at her less, his eyes drifting, as though his mind were miles away. He was absent-minded at dinners, forgetting the smallest details that used to be second nature to him, like how Emma preferred her tea or what color flowers she adored. The more these instances piled up, the more that tiny voice of doubt in her heart amplified into a roar. 7 months into her pregnancy, Emma discovered something she wished she hadn't. Sorting through the day's mail, she came across an unmarked envelope. She almost discarded it, thinking it was yet another flyer or sample addressed to occupant. Curiosity tugged at her, though, and she slid a letter opener delicately through the seal. Inside were 2 hotel receipts from the Four Seasons Resort Maui at Wailea, one of the most luxurious places in Hawaii, well known for catering to the world's elite. The billing address was to Lucas Carlyle. The dates matched the days he claimed to be away on business conferences in San Francisco. Emma's stomach twisted. He had never mentioned flying to Maui. For a moment, she rationalized that perhaps his business had extended that far. But the receipt included spa treatments for 2, expensive dinners for 2, and a private oceanfront cabana. This was no ordinary business trip. Her breath came in shallow spurts as she realized the name on the second occupant line was carefully smudged with pen. Emma recognized it as Lucas's handwriting, awkwardly scribbled, as if he wanted to obscure who had accompanied him. The realization settled in her chest like a heavy stone. Had Lucas been lying to her all this time? The father of her unborn child, the man she thought she knew inside and out, was living a double life. She tried to summon the courage to confront him, but every time she envisioned it, she pictured that calm, controlled expression he wore so well. She knew he'd likely have an excuse, some improbable story that might put her mind at ease for a day or two, until more damning evidence emerged. The heartbreak was already an ache she could barely contain, yet she also felt a searing anger that made her want to hurl those receipts in his face. Emma decided she needed to keep her composure, to gather more information. She thought it would be best to wait for the right moment, to find out who exactly was staying with him in those rooms. But part of her dreaded the entire ordeal. It hurt enough to see the receipts. Could she bear witnessing more? A week later, Lucas insisted she accompany him to a high-profile networking event in Manhattan, an elegant cocktail gala for entrepreneurs and socialites. The shimmering lights of the venue bounced off crystal chandeliers, and the hum of conversation rose like a distant ocean. Emma wore a flowing burgundy gown that draped over her pregnant belly. She felt eyes upon her, some sympathetic, some curious. Lucas moved around the room smoothly, greeting potential investors, exchanging pleasantries with friends, as though the last few months of suspicion and distance had been a figment of Emma's imagination. She tried to be the supportive wife, offering polite smiles and nods, but she couldn't help noticing the quick glances from a few women who seemed to know something she didn't. Their eyes darted from her to Lucas. They whispered behind their manicured hands, occasionally letting out low giggles or disapproving tuts. Eventually, Emma slipped away to a side lounge where a few of the wives had congregated. She recognized Clarissa Walters, an old friend and philanthropic influencer who had once praised Emma for her kindness. Tonight, Clarissa seemed on edge, but also sympathetic. She asked Emma how she was doing and mentioned that pregnancy can be stressful, especially if one's husband was so preoccupied with new relationships and business deals. Emma's heart picked up speed. They were careful with their words, but Emma suspected Clarissa had heard rumors. No one was bold enough to say the mistress's name, but they all knew. Women in these circles usually did. Emma's cheeks burned with humiliation. It was one thing to suspect her husband's betrayal, privately another thing to realize the entire social circle might be gossiping about it. That night, after returning home, Emma decided to piece the puzzle together once and for all. She began rummaging through Lucas's office, scanning his calendar and to-do lists, checking for any slip of truth. She felt a pang of guilt for invading his privacy, but her heartbreak pushed her forward. She discovered that Lucas had a flight reservation to Florida in a few days. She tried to recall if he had told her about any trip. She drew a blank. Her trembling fingers tapped her phone screen, pulling up his digital calendar that they sometimes shared. Nothing about Florida. Instead, an innocuous note in his day planner read, "Meeting with Bergstrom and Company." She decided to call a friend who worked in finance. He confirmed that Bergstrom and Company was definitely based in New York. They had no Florida outposts. Emma's breath caught. If Lucas wasn't traveling for a business meeting, then why was he going to Florida? She felt her baby kick. A wave of maternal protectiveness rushed through her. She had to find out. She told herself that the child in her womb had the right to know if their father was a philanderer. She steeled her resolve and booked a flight on the same day, planning to follow him discreetly. Emma masked her plan by telling Lucas she was visiting her cousin for a weekend baby shower in Pittsburgh. He barely looked up from his phone, distracted and immersed in a conversation with someone on the other end of a text chat. He simply said, "Have a safe trip," and planted a cursory kiss on her forehead. Emma swallowed her heartbreak, wondering what had happened to the man who used to cradle her face in his hands and gaze at her with complete devotion. The next day, Emma sat at the boarding gate of LaGuardia Airport, her nerves frayed. She wore a loose-fitting dress and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her face. She kept checking her phone, half expecting Lucas to call and demand where she was, or to announce that the trip was cancelled, but no such call came. Upon landing in Florida, she discreetly followed Lucas at a distance through the busy corridors, staying back just enough so he wouldn't recognize her in the crowd. Outside the airport, Emma rented a small sedan, much different from the chauffeured cars. Lucas usually employed and followed from afar, relying on a combination of intuition and vantage points to keep up with him. She was prepared for the heartbreak she might witness, but each mile inched her closer to the truth that could shatter her world permanently. Lucas eventually turned off the main highway onto a secluded lane. Emma recognized the area as one of Florida's top vacation hotspots for the wealthier place of private beaches and exclusive resorts. The watery sunlight gleamed over immaculate lawns lined with palm trees. After a few turns, she saw him pull into a gated driveway. The sign outside read Clearwater Shores Villas, an ultra-luxurious property known to host celebrities and affluent entrepreneurs. Emma parked some distance away, beyond the villa's private entrance. Her heart pounded as she considered her next move. She reminded herself she was no meek, helpless victim. She had endured so much, and she deserved the truth. The baby kicked again, as though reminding her of the life she was fighting for. She slipped past the gates when no one was watching, apparently. Staff here recognized the usual guests and didn't question them much. Trying to remain inconspicuous, she scanned for Lucas's car among the row of immaculate vehicles. Hers stuck out in its ordinariness, so she parked further away from the main lot and walked. Luxury dripped from every corner of the property, from the mosaic-tiled fountains to the sweeping archways. After some searching, Emma spotted Lucas's sleek black SUV parked outside a secluded villa near the beachfront. Soft music and laughter drifted from inside. The curtains were slightly drawn, but the door to the veranda was open, letting in the ocean breeze. Emma felt her chest tighten with dread. She crept closer, careful not to be seen. Peering in through the gap in the curtains, she saw a sight she could never forget. Lucas, sitting on a plush sofa, close to a striking woman with chestnut hair that caught the fading sunlight. Their hands were intertwined. The woman leaned in to whisper something in Lucas's ear, and he smiled an open, affectionate smile. Emma hadn't seen directed at her in months. The world spun around her. Emma watched from the shadows, frozen by heartbreak. She studied the woman who had stolen Lucas's heart. She was elegant in a way that suggested old money, wearing a flowing sundress, simple yet impeccable. She had an easy confidence as she leaned over to place a delicate hand on Lucas's face and kissed him softly. Emma felt her own cheeks burn with tears she refused to release. She overheard snippets of conversation. The woman's name was Sophia Arrington, a name that rang vaguely familiar. Emma thought perhaps she was from one of those well-off families in Palm Beach. Emma listened, her breath shallow, as Sophia teased Lucas about how he was working too hard, how he needed to slow down and enjoy their time together. Lucas's answer made Emma's stomach churn. "I promise. Once everything is set with the baby, I'll find a way to handle it. Handle it." As though their baby, Emma's and Lucas's child, were an inconvenience. Emma felt anger erupt like hot lava in her veins. She turned away, pressing herself against the side of the house, tears mixing with sweat in the stifling Florida heat. She hadn't planned how to confront them, only to gather enough proof to force Lucas to tell the truth. But this was beyond her darkest imagination. Emma knew that if she burst into the villa, her emotions would overwhelm her, and she might not achieve what she needed. She resolved to collect evidence. Swallowing her revulsion, she recorded a short video on her phone, zoomed in through the gap, capturing Lucas's face, Sophia's face, their intimate proximity, the entire wretched tableau. Then she quietly left the property, her mind spinning with possibilities. She called Clarissa Walters, the philanthropic influencer from the cocktail gala. Clarissa picked up on the first ring, sounding worried. Emma confided everything she had seen. Clarissa listened with hushed sympathy, telling Emma that she suspected there was more to Lucas's mistress than just a casual fling. Rumor had it that Sophia came from a financially troubled but well-connected family, seeking wealthy men to ensure her lavish lifestyle. Clarissa promised to keep an ear to the ground. Over the next few days, Emma stayed at a modest inn in Florida, incognito. She secretly tracked Lucas as he and Sophia dined at exclusive restaurants, went shopping for expensive jewelry, and took moonlit strolls on the beach. Each moment was another dagger in Emma's heart, yet she forced herself to keep gathering evidence. She even considered hiring a private investigator, but her instincts told her that the video footage and eyewitness accounts would be enough. On the third day, she discovered that Lucas had rented a small yacht for a private celebration with Sophia. As Emma watched them sail off from a distance, she clutched the hotel receipts from Maui, the new receipts from Florida, and her phone with incriminating videos. She realized Lucas wasn't just dallying around, he was living a full-blown alternative life, complete with romantic gestures that once were exclusively hers. Emma's heartbreak soon turned to confusion and fear when she saw a text message appear on her phone from a blocked number. It read, "Don't be naive. Leave Florida now, or you'll regret it." Her heart dropped. It seemed someone was aware of her presence and her vigil. She wondered if Lucas or Sophia had grown suspicious. Anxiety gnawed at her. She was pregnant, alone, and thrust into a dangerous scenario. She tried to remain calm, rationalizing that perhaps it was a scare tactic to keep her away. That night, she placed a chair against the door of her inn-room, ensuring no one could enter without her knowledge. She lay awake in bed, protective instincts flaring for her unborn child. The next morning, she weighed her options. She could confront Lucas here in Florida, or wait until he returned home and face him in a more controlled environment. She also worried about her own safety now. The message threatened her, implying that if she didn't back off, there could be consequences. Determined to stand her ground, she decided she would fly back to Manhattan, gather what remained of her composure, and plan a confrontation that no one would be able to dismiss. Before leaving Florida, Emma did one last thing. She approached the villa where Lucas and Sophia were staying. In a daring move, she pretended to be an event planner, introducing herself at the reception desk, asking if the guests in Villa 14 needed additional arrangements. The unsuspecting staff mentioned that Mr. Carlyle and Miss Arrington had extended their stay for another week. Emma clenched her jaw at the confirmation. Then, with a tight smile, she left. She had all she needed. Back in Manhattan, Emma collapsed into the solitude of her penthouse. The city lights seemed cold and distant now, a stark contrast to her once fairy tale life. Feeling the baby's rhythmic kicks, she whispered promises into the still air. She vowed to protect her child from the heartbreak swirling around them. Emma considered the best way to confront Lucas. She could do it privately, just the two of them, but a part of her wanted the world to see the truth. She wanted his immaculate image tarnished in front of the same crowd that had admired their marriage as the epitome of glamour. Through Clarissa's connections, she discovered Lucas had a significant business event scheduled the following week, a private investor retreat in Lake Placid, upstate New York, where deals worth millions would be signed. It was rumored that everything Lucas had built up to this point, his entire startup, hinged on securing these final investments. Emma decided that would be the perfect time to appear, armed with her evidence. Let him face the reality of what he'd done when the stakes were highest. In the meantime, Emma made copies of all the receipts, took screenshots of her phone videos, and even placed them on a secure online drive. She wouldn't give Lucas any chance to buy his way out of this. Every piece of incriminating proof was carefully preserved. She also consulted a high-powered divorce attorney recommended by Clarissa, who assured Emma that her evidence would bolster any legal claim she might pursue. But Emma still wrestled with the question of why. Why would Lucas risk everything for this mistress? Was it mere lust, or was there more at play? She scoured financial documents for any sign that his business was in jeopardy or that Sophia had some hold over him. Bits and pieces suggested that Lucas's finances, while extensive, were more precarious than anyone believed. He had poured massive amounts into expansions, taken loans, courted new investors with bold promises. Perhaps a wealthy, connected mistress was part of his strategy to secure new funding. The thought sickened Emma, but it also lit a fire in her heart. She wouldn't let him use her or their child as pawns in his ruthless climb to power. Days passed like molasses, each one a churn of dread and anticipation for Emma. She immersed herself in tasks, organizing the penthouse, sorting baby clothes, drafting possible statements she might say to Lucas. She practiced her confrontation in front of the mirror, tears threatening to spill whenever she pictured the look on his face when she revealed she knew everything. Part of her wanted to see regret, heartbreak in his eyes. Another part wanted him to suffer as she had. When Lucas finally returned from Florida, Emma maintained a facade of normalcy. He arrived late in the evening, offering some vague explanation about a delayed flight from a California conference. He didn't bring back any souvenirs, nor did he make any mention of his extended absence. Emma noticed a faint scent on him that wasn't cologne, something floral, reminiscent of the breezes in Florida. Her heart twisted, but she said nothing. She offered a tired smile and retreated to the guest bedroom, claiming she was more comfortable sleeping alone in her current stage of pregnancy. Lucas barely batted an eye at that. He seemed relieved to avoid her presence. Emma realized then how far apart they had drifted. That once scorching passion was now a mere flicker of courtesy. She hardened her resolve. The confrontation was near. On a crisp autumn day, Lucas departed again, this time to Lake Placid for his pivotal investor retreat. Emma waited a few days, timing her arrival for the evening when she knew the investors would host a glamorous gala at the retreat lodge. She drove up herself, determined to catch him off guard. The scenic route was supposed to be breathtaking, but Emma saw only the reflection of her own tension in the mirror. When she arrived at the lodge, she was taken aback by its grandeur. Perched beside a crystal-clear lake, it boasted a sprawling compound of wooden cabins and stately meeting halls, all wrapped in the majestic embrace of the Adirondack Mountains. Staff bustled around, ensuring high-profile guests were catered to. Emma spotted name tags for wealthy executives, some faces she recognized from the Manhattan social circuit. Before making her entrance, she changed into a floor-length emerald dress that accentuated her pregnant belly while still showcasing her elegance. She carefully did her makeup, noting that despite her emotional turmoil, her reflection looked poised. This was her moment. She wasn't just Emma Carlyle, the housewife. She was a woman wronged, and she had a voice. Stepping into the main hall was like entering a different world. Soft music wafted through the air. Candles glimmered on tables adorned with exquisite floral arrangements. Genteel laughter and quiet conversations filled the space. Emma felt eyes on her immediately. A few recognized her from past events, their gazes flicking from her belly to her determined expression. She spotted Lucas near a tall window overlooking the lake, engaged in a tense conversation with a group of investors. There was an intensity about him, a desperation in his gestures, as though he was trying to convince them of something. Emma inhaled sharply, remembering how he used to be so confident. Now she saw glimpses of fear in his eyes. If he didn't seal these deals, everything might come crashing down. Determined, Emma made her way across the room. A hush fell over certain clusters of guests as she passed by. Her heart thumped violently, but she steadied herself. Finally, she reached Lucas. He turned, startled to see her. "Emma, what are you doing here?" he stammered. She noticed how he scanned the crowd, perhaps worried about how this surprise arrival might look. Or maybe he feared the secrets she carried. "Hello, Lucas," she said, her voice calm, yet laced with an undercurrent of tension. Her gaze flicked to the investors. "Mind if I borrow my husband for a quick moment?" Lucas excused himself from the group, promising to return shortly. He led Emma to a quieter corner near the buffet tables. He forced a smile, but there was panic in his eyes. "Emma, we'll talk about whatever it is after this. Right now is a critical moment for the company," he said in hushed urgency. Emma drew in a steadying breath. She reached into her clutch and pulled out one of the Maui receipts, brandishing it before Lucas. "After your business conference?" You mean like the one in Maui? She let the name drop, her eyes boring into his. Lucas's face lost a shade of color. He opened his mouth to protest, but Emma pressed forward, producing the Florida receipts and the screenshots from her phone. How long, Lucas? How long have you been deceiving me and lying to my face? She demanded, voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Lucas glanced around, trying to maintain composure. Emma, please, not here. We can sort this out in private, he whispered, fear evident in his eyes. The scornful tear in Emma's gaze revealed that she was past caring about discretion. All she could see was the man who had promised to protect her and their child, now exposed as a fraud. She wanted him to feel the shame she had felt. At that moment, the crowd parted almost theatrically, and in walked Sophia Arrington, clad in a sleek black gown that showcased her willowy figure. Emma's breath caught. She hadn't known Sophia would be here, but in retrospect, it made sense. If Lucas was using connections through Sophia or her associates, she might be present for the big pitch. Lucas's face went pale. Emma noticed how he involuntarily shifted, as though preparing to shield Sophia from the impending disaster. This only fueled Emma's anger. She addressed Sophia directly, her voice echoing across the hush that now enveloped them. So you're the woman my husband's been parading around with. I hope he told you I'm pregnant with his child. Sophia blinked, a flicker of discomfort crossing her refined features. Whether she had any shame was unclear, but her cheeks tinged pink. She glanced from Lucas to Emma. This isn't the time or place, Sophia said softly, casting a desperate look at Lucas. In that moment, Emma laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. You're worried about time and place now? Did either of you spare a thought for me when you were sneaking off to Maui or Florida? Did you care about the scandal or the heartbreak? Tears glimmered at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Whispers rippled through the crowd, which had begun to circle around them. Among the onlookers were influential investors, socialites, and perhaps even some journalists who had come to cover the high-stakes retreat. Lucas's face told the story of a man whose carefully crafted world was teetering on the brink of ruin. Emma had once admired his confidence, but now she saw the hollowness behind it. Sophia placed a hand on Lucas's arm, trying to steady him. "We need to handle this discreetly," she muttered. Lucas, evidently panicked, tried to usher Emma out of the hall. "Let's talk in private, please," he pleaded. But Emma stood her ground, removing a phone from her clutch. She pressed the play button, and a video began to stream the image of Lucas and Sophia in that Florida villa, intimately chatting on the couch. The audio was faint, but the faces were unmistakable. A few gasps sounded from the watchers. Emma refused to be silenced. "I gave up everything for you, Lucas," she choked out. "I believed in your dreams, your business. I stood by you even when you became distant. And all this time, you've been carrying on with her." Lucas tried to grab her wrist, but she jerked away. She looked into his eyes and saw something terrifying remorse mingled with a desperate need to contain the scandal. But there was no genuine apology yet. "Why, Lucas?" she asked, voice quivering. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, aware that every word was being dissected by the silent, wide-eyed crowd. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he managed. "I thought Sophia and her family, they promised to bring in investments. I needed to keep the company afloat, and it got complicated. I never meant to hurt you, Emma, I swear." Sophia, evidently uncomfortable under the gaze of so many, tried to salvage the moment. "Lucas, let's just tell them the truth about your finances, about how the money is gone. We can't hide it anymore. These investors deserve honesty." A ripple passed through the group of investors who were obviously concerned about the revelation. Emma felt her fury flare higher. Money, finances. This was the reason he threw away their marriage. She stared in disbelief. "You can't blame your betrayal on a business deal," she hissed. "You betrayed our vows. You destroyed our family for a shot at more money." Lucas shook his head as if confusion rattled him. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "Things spiraled. I was over my head. I never meant for this to happen." Just then, one of the primary investors in the group, a stern, grey-haired man, stepped forward. "So, let me get this straight," he began. "You courted our investment by presenting false financial statements, all while hoping your mistress could pull in even more funds behind the scenes?" His expression was a mix of disgust and fury. "We don't invest in men who lie at home. They certainly can't be trusted with our money." That statement landed with the weight of a judge's gavel. A couple of other investors murmured their agreement, stepping away from Lucas. Their expressions made it clear. They wanted nothing more to do with him. The entire business empire he'd built was disintegrating before Emma's eyes, and, ironically, she felt no pity. Sophia, seeing the collapse, hissed something into Lucas's ear. Emma didn't catch it, but the frustrated expression on Sophia's face was clear. If Lucas was no longer financially reliable, what would become of their arrangement? Emma watched as a flicker of panic passed between them. Then, in a final public denunciation, the grey-haired investor announced, "We're withdrawing our interest effective immediately. We'll be reconsidering our connections with Carlyle Innovations." Gasps and murmurs intensified while hotel staff looked on with uncertainty. Lucas swayed, as though physically struck by the words. His reputation, his credibility, his entire livelihood crumbling in real time. Karma had a way of arriving swiftly when the mask dropped. In that suspended moment, Emma realized something profound. She was free. Free from illusions, free from waiting for Lucas to return to the man she had once known. She had done her part, exposed him for the liar he was. Now she needed to salvage her own life, for her sake and for her child's. She felt a burden lift off her shoulders, replaced by an urgent sense of self-preservation and motherhood. She turned to leave, her heart pounding as though it might leap from her chest. She heard Lucas call after her, "Emma, wait!" But she ignored him. If she stayed, she feared she might crumble in tears at the heartbreak of it all. Yet she wouldn't let him see her like that. Not now, not after she had fought so hard to stand tall. Outside, the night was cool, and a gentle wind passed over the placid lake. Emma found a bench near the shore, took off her heels, and let her swollen feet rest on the grass. She breathed in the crisp air, tears finally streaming down her face. She felt a swirl of emotions, relief, sadness, anger. The confrontation was over, but her life was now forever changed. Clarissa Walters, who had driven up earlier out of concern, found Emma near the lake. Clarissa wrapped a warm shawl over Emma's shoulders. "You're strong," she whispered. "You did what you had to do. No one here will doubt what really happened." Emma nodded, touched by her friend's unwavering support. For a brief moment, she worried about finances. Lucas had controlled most of their assets. But she remembered her attorney's words. The courts would likely side with her, especially given the evidence of infidelity. She also had her father's small inheritance, tucked away a nest egg that might sustain her while she restructured her life. Most importantly, she had her baby, a new life to cherish and protect. 2 weeks after the scandal in Lake Placid, Emma's life took another dramatic turn. She was finalizing the divorce papers in her attorney's office when she felt a sharp, insistent cramp in her abdomen. She looked at her attorney with wide eyes. Another contraction hit, and panic seized her. She hadn't expected labor this soon. She was barely at 38 weeks, but the baby decided it was time. Clarissa drove Emma to the hospital, where nurses quickly ushered her into a birthing suite. The hours that followed were both exhilarating and excruciating. As she labored, images of Lucas's betrayal flickered in her mind. Yet a stronger emotion took hold, an overwhelming desire to meet her child, to hold them, to promise them a life filled with genuine love and honesty. Lucas got word, presumably from a call Emma's attorney placed, and he arrived at the hospital. But Emma refused to see him. She was amidst the final agonizing push when her child, a beautiful baby boy, let out his first cry. Sobs of joy racked Emma's body. In that moment, she forgot all about Lucas, about Sophia, about the entire heartbreak. All that mattered was the new life in her arms. Several hours later, as Emma rested, a nurse gently knocked and announced that Lucas was outside, begging to see his son. Emma's heart twisted. She didn't want a scene, but she also recognized that he was the child's father. Summoning what remained of her resolve, she told the nurse to let Lucas in, albeit briefly. Lucas entered tentatively, his eyes puffy, face drawn. He looked haggard, like a man who had lost everything. Quietly, he approached Emma's bedside, glancing at the sleeping infant in her arms. He whispered, "May I hold him?" Emma hesitated, her protective instincts roaring, but something inside her loosened. She gently passed the newborn over, watching as Lucas cradled him in trembling arms. Tears streaked Lucas's face. "He's perfect," he murmured. Emma closed her eyes, recalling the sweet moments of their marriage before everything went wrong. She told him in a soft but firm tone, "I don't want you to think this changes anything between us. Our son deserves a father, but he also deserves to be protected from lies and betrayal. I'm willing to set up a custody arrangement, but I need you to understand that I'm moving on." Lucas nodded, tears still escaping. In that moment, Emma saw a glimpse of genuine remorse, perhaps even heartbreak. But it was too late for them. Karma had done its part. The damage was irreversible. She would let him be part of their son's life, but as for their marriage, it lay in ruins, replaced by a new beginning for her and the child. Rumors swirled in Manhattan's high society about Sophia Arrington's abrupt downfall. The wealthy family she claimed to have connections with withdrew their support when news broke of the scandal at Lake Placid. It turned out that Sophia had been using Lucas for more than just romance. She'd hoped to leverage his rising star in the tech world to regain her own family's favor. But once the scandal became public, no one wanted the Arrington name tied to such a messy affair. Sophia soon lost invitations to prestigious events. Her social media presence dwindled to near nothing. Word was that her trust fund had been cut off, leaving her to scramble for financial stability. She attempted to contact Lucas, but he was too mired in his own ruin. Bankruptcy threatened his business, the investor deals having slipped away. Emma heard from Clarissa that Sophia was last seen drifting through lesser-known clubs, seeking new benefactors. Hard karma had indeed come for Sophia as well. Lucas attempted to salvage his company, but the public revelation of his misleading financials meant a rapid and disastrous loss of investor confidence. Share prices plummeted, partners withdrew, lawsuits loomed. In a desperate move, Lucas sold the penthouse to cover some of his debts. He even reached out to Emma for help, claiming that if he went bankrupt, he wouldn't be able to support their son. But Emma was no longer naive. She directed all communications through her attorney, who ensured child support would be arranged under strict legal conditions. Emma felt a pang of pity sometimes, recalling how unstoppable Lucas once seemed, but pity was overshadowed by the memory of betrayal. She refused to let him manipulate her again. Emma moved into a cozy, sun-drenched apartment overlooking a small park in Brooklyn. It wasn't the lavish penthouse, but she found comfort in its simplicity. She began painting again, a hobby she'd once abandoned in the whirlwind of her marriage. She placed her baby boy's crib near the largest window so he could nap under soft streams of sunlight. Every day she marveled at how her child's peaceful presence made her feel alive, hopeful. She also started taking online courses in interior design, an old passion she had set aside when she married Lucas. Clarissa helped connect her to a few small freelance jobs designing nursery spaces for mothers in their circle. Little by little, Emma built a portfolio, gathering testimonials, forging an independent path. With each new project, she regained confidence in her abilities and her worth. One morning, Emma received a surprise call from the grey-haired investor who had publicly denounced Lucas at Lake Placid, Jonathan Price. In a gentle tone, he apologized for the drama that had unfolded. He expressed sympathy for Emma's situation, admitting that while business was business, he regretted how personally destructive it had all become for her. He also commended her courage in exposing the truth. Then he offered an olive branch. "I have a friend who's looking for an interior design consultant for a boutique hotel. He's opening in upstate New York. I've seen pictures of your personal spaces online. Clarissa forwarded me. If you're interested, it could be a valuable partnership." Emma felt tears of gratitude. She agreed to meet. Despite the heartbreak and shame she'd suffered, she realized not everyone in those wealthy circles lacked empathy. Jonathan Price saw potential and integrity in her, separate from Lucas's sins. Emma took that as a sign, a chance at a fresh start. Before finalizing the custody arrangements, Emma agreed to a mediation session with Lucas. She hadn't seen him since the hospital. He arrived looking thinner, less composed, the spark in his eyes all but extinguished. They discussed logistics, how often he would see the baby, how financial support would be structured, how medical expenses would be shared. Emma stood her ground firmly. She had learned to protect herself and her son. Lucas tried to apologize. "I was stupid and greedy. I lost sight of what mattered," he said, voice shaking. Emma met his gaze. "I don't hate you," she finally answered, "but I don't trust you, and I can't forgive you yet. My priority is ensuring our son grows up loved and secure." He nodded, tears gathering at the corner of his eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes to make it up to him," he whispered. Only time would tell if that was true. For Emma, the conversation gave her a sense of finality. She realized she was no longer dependent on Lucas emotionally or financially. She was stronger now than she had ever been. Despite the swirling rumors, Emma managed to maintain her dignity. Clarissa helped her navigate any unwanted press inquiries, painting Emma as the wronged but resilient mother. Journalists who tried to sensationalize the story quickly found that Emma refused to air dirty laundry for profit. She simply stated the facts when necessary and focused on her new design projects. Meanwhile, Lucas sank further into obscurity. The lawsuits drained his resources. He ended up selling nearly everything, including his prized sports cars and private membership club passes. Emma heard from acquaintances that he was living in a modest apartment, working under a former competitor to pay his bills. It was a far cry from the millionaire lifestyle he once flaunted. Months later, Emma received an unexpected letter hand-delivered. It was from Sophia Arrington. Emma's gut reaction was anger, but curiosity made her open it. Sophia apologized for her role in the affair, claiming she had been misled by Lucas's promises of a stable future. She insisted she'd had no idea Emma was pregnant until much later. The letter read as though Sophia wanted absolution, explaining that her own life had become a nightmare since the scandal. She pleaded for forgiveness, or at least understanding. Emma read the words, feeling a swirl of emotions. She wondered if Sophia's apologies were genuine or just another ploy. Either way, Emma decided not to respond. She could find her own peace without engaging. The best revenge, after all, was living well. Over time, Emma's design business flourished. She put her heart into each project, inspired by the knowledge that she could craft environments of serenity and warmth, something she had desperately craved during her tumultuous marriage. Her son, whom she named Oliver, grew healthy and joyful. His laughter filled the apartment, infusing life into every corner. Emma's circle of supportive friends expanded as well. She began attending events again, not as Lucas Carlyle's wife, but as Emma Carlyle, the up-and-coming interior designer with an empathetic touch. She signed a lease for a small studio, employing 2 assistants. Each day she arrived at the studio with Oliver in tow, determined to build a future free from betrayal and deceit. In a twist of fate, Emma was contacted for a potential project in Florida, specifically near the same luxury villas in Clearwater Shores. A prominent family wanted to revamp their oceanfront property. Emma hesitated at first. Memories of heartbreak still raw, but she realized this was another step toward reclaiming her power. She accepted the job. When she returned to Florida, she felt an unexpected sense of calm. The sunshine and gentle ocean breeze reminded her of the day she'd discovered Lucas's affair. But now she stood on her own 2 feet, proud, strong, a respected professional. One afternoon, curiosity led her to drive by the villa where Lucas and Sophia once flaunted their romance. The place looked the same: pristine lawns, gleaming architecture. Emma felt no pang of sadness or rage, only a sense of triumph. Life had gone on, and she had won back her self-worth. Time, as it often does, healed many wounds. When Oliver was nearly a year old, Emma found herself unexpectedly drawn to a fellow designer named Matteo, whom she met at a trade show. He was gentle, creative, and respectful of her boundaries. She was hesitant at first, afraid of repeating history, but Matteo's kindness and steady support gradually thawed the walls around her heart. They began collaborating on projects, and he bonded sweetly with little Oliver, never trying to replace his father, but always there for him. For Emma, it felt surreal to experience a form of love not tainted by deception. She told Matteo about her past, and instead of recoiling, he admired her strength. A quiet, cautious romance blossomed. For the first time in years, Emma believed in the possibility of a happy ending on her own terms. News eventually trickled back to Emma that Lucas was making an attempt at redemption. He'd secured a small venture capital loan to start a modest software consultancy. He was apparently living responsibly, no flashy expenses, and was consistent with child support payments. He visited Oliver under the arranged schedule, always making sure not to cross Emma's personal boundaries. In a strange way, Emma realized that as painful as it was, the downfall forced Lucas to confront his demons. If his earlier life was built on illusions, perhaps now he had a chance to build something real. As for Sophia, rumors placed her in Europe, hopping from city to city. Some said she was attempting to marry into another wealthy family. Others claimed she was struggling with mounting debts. Regardless, Emma no longer paid attention to Sophia's fate. Hard karma had already done its work. Emma focused on her own life, her child, her art, her burgeoning career, and the gentle love growing between her and Matteo. One sunny afternoon, Emma found a moment of peace on her apartment balcony, sipping tea while Oliver napped. She let her mind wander back through the chaos of the past year, the discovery of Lucas's affair, the dramatic confrontation at Lake Placid, the avalanche of consequences that followed. She thought about the receipts from the Four Seasons Resort Maui, now tucked away in a box labeled Old Life. She remembered the hush that fell over the crowd when she exposed Lucas, how her entire world had seemed to tilt. Yet from that upheaval, she emerged stronger, more self-aware. She discovered a talent and passion for design that now sustained her. She found support in genuine friendships, especially Clarissa, who had proven that not all wealthy socialites were shallow. Most importantly, she embraced motherhood with an intensity she never anticipated. Oliver gave her days a sense of wonder, and nights a sense of purpose. Yes, the betrayal stung, but it no longer defined her. She had turned the page, forging a path forward that was hers alone. Emma allowed a small smile to form, feeling the gentle breeze graze her cheeks. This is my life now, she thought, and it's beautiful in its own imperfect way. Thank you for joining me on this whirlwind journey of betrayal, heartbreak, and redemption. Emma's fierce determination to uncover the truth led her into the darkest corners of her marriage, but also guided her to a future brighter than she ever imagined. From a shocking confrontation at a glamorous investor retreat to finding her own strength as a single mother, Emma's story proves that loyalty to oneself can conquer the pain of betrayal. And in the end, hard karma has a way of rebalancing the scales.
The scent of expensive cologne and unfamiliar perfume hit Seraphina Thorne before she even saw them. Her heart, a frantic bird against her ribs, knew. Pushing open the bedroom door of their St. Moritz chalet, the scene confirmed her deepest fear, Julian. Her husband entangled with another woman. But the gut-wrenching betrayal of that moment was nothing compared to what she'd discover later. Because Seraphina had planted a hidden camera, a tiny, unblinking eye. And that camera recorded every whispered word Julian spoke about their future, about her family's legacy, and most chillingly about the baby. What he said would shatter her world far more completely than any infidelity. Seraphina Vanderbilt. Thorne had a life most people only read about in glossy magazines. Heiress to the Vanderbilt shipping and real estate dynasty. Her marriage to Julian Thorne, a charismatic investment banker from a less prominent but respectable family, had been the social event of the decade. Their life was a whirlwind of charity galas at the Metropolitan Museum of Art summers, in their Hamptons estate winters, skiing in St. Moritz, and navigating the intricate dance of New York high society from their sprawling Fifth Avenue penthouse. For 5 years it had seemed idyllic. Julian was attentive, charming, and seemingly devoted. He'd integrated seamlessly into her world, advising her on philanthropic endeavors, and even taking a keen interest in managing parts of the vast Vanderbilt portfolio, something her aging but still sharp father had guardedly allowed. Seraphina, in turn, had been deeply in love, believing she'd found a partner who saw her beyond the Vanderbilt name. But the last 6 months had felt different. Julian was more distant, working later hours. His explanations were plausible. A complex merger demanding clients the usual pressures of high finance. Yet a subtle chill had crept into their interactions. The easy laughter, the spontaneous touches, the quiet moments of connection. They were fading, replaced by a polite formality that felt alien. Her best friend Beatrice, whose family owned a string of luxury hotels worldwide, had been the first to voice concern. "He's just too smooth." "Sarah," Beatrice had said over lunch at Le Bernardin, her perfectly manicured finger tapping her champagne flute. "Men like that, when they change, it's rarely for a spreadsheet." Seraphina had brushed it off, attributing it to Beatrice's inherent cynicism. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Little things started to niggle at her. A hushed phone call Julian ended abruptly when she entered the room. A credit card statement with a charge for a ridiculously expensive piece of jewelry from Cartier that she'd never received. His sudden insistence on reviewing parts of her father's more private financial documents, citing the need for better integration and modern risk assessment. The breaking point came during their annual trip to St. Moritz. They were staying at the magnificent Kulm Hotel, a place filled with happy memories of their early marriage. But Julian was more preoccupied than ever. One evening, he claimed an urgent video conference with Hong Kong investors that would last hours. He'd be working from the hotel's business center, he said. A wave of unease, sharp and undeniable, washed over Seraphina. It was nearly 10 p.m. Why the business center when their suite had a perfectly good study? Armed with a sudden cold resolve she didn't know she possessed, Serafina decided to act on a desperate idea that had been forming in the back of her mind. The week before, plagued by a gnawing intuition, she'd purchased a state-of-the-art miniature recording device disguised as a sleek black USB charger. It was military-grade, capable of capturing high-definition video and audio, and small enough to be virtually undetectable. She'd initially bought it thinking she might leave it in his home office, but now St. Moritz felt like the place. This chalet they often rented for more privacy when not at the Kulm, a place Julian sometimes used for focused work, suddenly felt like a potential stage for something sinister. That afternoon, before Julian's supposed late-night conference, Serafina had made an excuse to visit their preferred private chalet, a magnificent multi-story property nestled into the mountainside, claiming she'd left a sentimental scarf there during their last visit. While the concierge, a kindly old gentleman named Klaus, waited patiently downstairs, Serafina had quickly moved through the master suite. Her hands trembled as she plugged the disguised camera into a discreet outlet near the large oak desk in the study area, angling it to cover both the desk and a significant portion of the adjoining bedroom. It felt duplicitous, a violation of the trust she so desperately wanted to believe still existed. But the alternative, living with the suffocating weight of suspicion, was becoming unbearable. Now, with Julian supposedly at the Kulm's business center, Serafina felt an irresistible pull towards the chalet. An icy premonition gripped her. She slipped out of their hotel suite, her excuses to Julian about needing fresh air sounding weak even to her own ears. The crisp alpine air did little to calm the inferno of anxiety raging within her. The short chauffeured drive to the chalet felt like an eternity. As she approached, she saw it Julian's rental Range Rover, not at the Kulm, but parked discreetly behind a copse of snow-dusted fir trees near the chalet's private entrance. Her breath hitched. He wasn't at the business center. He was here. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a painful drumbeat of impending doom. With trembling fingers, she used her own key to let herself in. The chalet was silent save for the low hum of the underfloor heating. She crept up the polished wooden staircase, each step an agonizing journey towards a truth she wasn't sure she could face. The master bedroom door was slightly ajar, and then she heard it, a woman's soft laugh, followed by Julian's deeper murmur. It wasn't a business discussion. It was intimate familiar. Serafina's world tilted. The blood roared in her ears, a rushing torrent of disbelief and a pain so profound it stole her breath. She pushed the door open. The scene that greeted her would be seared into her memory forever. Julian, her husband, was in bedsheets tangled around his waist, and with him a striking red head. Serafina had never seen before her head resting on his bare chest. They both looked up, startled, their faces a mixture of shock, and in Julian's case a fleeting, quickly masked flicker of something that looked like annoyance rather than guilt. The woman shrieked softly and scrambled to cover herself. Julian, however, simply stared at Serafina, his expression hardening. "Serafina," he said, his voice devoid of warmth, of remorse, of anything but a chilling composure. "What are you doing here?" The sheer audacity of his question, the casual cruelty of it, struck Serafina dumb. The air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. The expensive cologne she'd smelled earlier, mingled with the cloying sweetness of the other woman's perfume, now made her nauseous. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. A strange, icy calm enveloped her. She simply looked at him, at the ruins of their marriage, at the smirking woman who was now fumbling for her clothes. "I think," Serafina said, her voice surprisingly steady, though her insides were churning. "The more pertinent question, Julian, is, what are you doing here?" Without waiting for an answer, she turned on her heel and walked out, leaving behind the wreckage in the St. Moritz chalet. The image of their shocked faces, the opulent room, suddenly feeling sordid and cheap, would haunt her. But as she descended the stairs, a single chilling thought cut through her pain. The camera. It was still there, still recording. What else had it captured? The answer, she somehow knew, would be far worse than the infidelity she had just witnessed. The betrayal was a surface wound. The real poison was yet to be revealed. Serafina didn't return to the Kulm Hotel. The thought of sharing a suite, a town, even the same crisp mountain air with Julian was unbearable. Instead, she had her driver take her directly to the Samadan airport, just a short distance from St. Moritz. Within an hour, the Vanderbilt private jet was being prepped. By dawn, she was back in New York, cocooned in the sterile luxury of her jet, the snowy peaks of the Engadine receding behind her like a bad dream. The silence of the jet was a stark contrast to the turmoil within her. The scene in the chalet replayed in her mind on a torturous loop. Julian's cold eyes, the redhead's smug fear, the disheveled bed, the scent of betrayal. Each replay was a fresh stab to her heart. How could he? How could he be so callous, so disrespectful, not just of her, but of their vows, their life, everything they had supposedly built? Upon landing, she didn't go to their Fifth Avenue penthouse. That too felt tainted, a monument to lies. Instead, she retreated to her late grandmother's secluded townhouse on the Upper East Side, a place of quiet elegance and childhood memories, a sanctuary Julian had rarely visited. The staff, loyal retainers who had served her family for decades, greeted her with concerned but discreet professionalism. For 2 days, Serafina existed in a fog of grief and rage. She barely ate. Sleep was a fleeting torment filled with nightmares. Beatrice rushed to her side, a pillar of furious support, cursing Julian with an inventiveness that would have been comical under any other circumstances. "We'll destroy him, Sarah," Beatrice vowed, her eyes flashing. "We'll bleed him dry. We'll make sure he can't even get a reservation at a Waffle House, let alone Le Bernardin." Serafina appreciated the ferocity, but her mind was elsewhere. It was fixed on the tiny black USB charger humming away in the St. Moritz chalet. She needed it back. She needed to know what it had recorded after she'd fled. Retrieving it was a delicate operation. She couldn't ask Julian. The mere thought of speaking to him made her physically ill. She certainly couldn't go herself. Instead, she called upon Mr. Davies, her father's fiercely loyal head of security, a man who could make problems disappear with quiet efficiency. Explaining the situation in vague terms, a sensitive item left behind a need for utmost discretion, was enough. Davies, a former MI6 operative, asked no questions. Within 24 hours, the small device was in Serafina's hands, delivered in a plain, padded envelope. Her hands trembled as she held it. This tiny piece of plastic and metal held secrets, and she was terrified of them. Beatrice offered to watch it with her, but Serafina knew she had to do this alone. Late that night, wrapped in a cashmere robe in her grandmother's dimly lit study, the city lights painting a muted glow on the walls, Serafina plugged the USB into her laptop. The file directory opened. There were several recordings, time-stamped. She found the one that began shortly before she had arrived at the chalet, and continued after her departure. Her breath hitched. With a click, she played it. The video quality was shockingly clear, the audio crisp. It began with Julian and the redhead, already in a state of undress, laughing and kissing. Serafina fast-forwarded through the painful intimacy, her stomach churning. She stopped when she heard her own voice from the hallway, then the door opening. She watched herself confront them, her on-screen persona, a mask of icy composure she hadn't felt. She watched herself turn and leave. Then the truly horrifying part began. The redhead, whose name she now heard Julian utter. Chloe began to panic. Julian. Oh my God. That was Serafina. What are we going to do? Is she going to tell everyone your father-in-law will ruin you? Julian. To Serafina's shock, let out a low, dismissive laugh. He rose from the bed, completely naked, and walked towards the minibar, pouring himself a generous splash of whiskey. Relax, Chloe, darling, he said, his voice smooth as silk, yet laced with a venom Serafina had never heard before. Serafina is predictable. She'll cry, she'll rage, then she'll run to her lawyers. It's inconvenient, certainly, but not a catastrophe. Inconvenient, Chloe shrieked, her voice tinged with hysteria. Julian, she caught us. This could derail everything. What about our plans? What about the baby? Serafina froze. Baby? What baby? Chloe wasn't visibly pregnant in the footage. Julian took a long sip of his whiskey, then turned to face Chloe, his expression predatory. The baby, he said, slowly enunciating each word with chilling precision, is precisely why this minor interruption doesn't matter in the long run. In fact, it might even accelerate things. Chloe looked confused. Accelerate how she'll divorce you. She'll cut you off. Oh, she'll try. Julian smirked, walking back towards the bed, where Chloe sat, clutching a sheet to her chest. He sat beside her, stroking her hair in a parody of affection. But you see, my love, the plan was always for me to secure a more permanent stake in the Vanderbilt empire. Serafina was the entry point. Her father, bless his increasingly frail mind, has been surprisingly easy to influence regarding family continuity. He leaned closer to Chloe, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the microphone picked up with horrifying clarity. The prenuptial agreement Serafina signed, the one her father's old guard lawyers advised against, but she, in her lovesick haze, waved through. It has certain clauses about legitimate heirs, clauses about diminished capacity. My lawyers are already working on a narrative. Serafina felt a cold dread seep into her bones. Clauses diminished capacity. What was he implying? Chloe still looked nervous. But the baby, if she divorces you now before it's born, before we can even be sure. Julian cut her off with a sharp look. The timing of the baby's arrival is perfect. You're 6 weeks along now. By the time any divorce proceedings get nasty, you'll be showing. A pregnant mistress. The heartbroken husband driven into the arms of another by a cold, barren wife more interested in her father's approval than her husband's needs. It's a classic script, my dear. And with old man Vanderbilt's health being so precarious, he let the sentence hang, a sinister implication in the air. The beauty of it, Julian continued, his voice filled with a chilling arrogance, is that our baby Chloe will be seen as the only potential Thorne heir with a direct link to the Vanderbilt legacy through me, especially once I contest the prenup citing emotional distress and Serafina's instability. He paused, then delivered the line that made Serafina's blood run cold. And if anyone questions the paternity, well, a little doubt can be a powerful tool. The key is that I acknowledge it. I claim it. The child is leverage. It ensures that even if Serafina tries to cut me out, a part of me, a part of us, remains intrinsically tied to the Vanderbilt fortune. Her father dotes on the idea of a grandchild. He might even alter his will in a fit of sentimentality, especially if Serafina is painted as uncooperative. Chloe finally seemed to grasp the depth of his cynicism. So Serafina walking in on us, it doesn't ruin anything. On the contrary, Julian said, a cruel smile playing on his lips. It just means I might have to play the grieving, wronged husband a little earlier than planned. Poor Serafina. So emotional, so fragile. Perhaps the shock of it all will be too much for her. Perhaps she'll need care, the kind of care that renders her incapable of managing her own affairs. He leaned in and kissed Chloe hard. The baby, my sweet, isn't just a baby. It's our golden ticket. It's the key to unlocking everything I'm owed, everything I deserve. Serafina and her father simply paved the way. Serafina stared at the screen, her face pale, her body trembling. The infidelity was a shallow cut compared to this gaping wound. This wasn't just about cheating. This was a calculated, cold-blooded plot to usurp her family's legacy, to potentially have her declared mentally incompetent, and to use an unborn child as a weapon. The man she had loved, the man she had married, was a monster. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just an adulterer. He was a con artist, a predator, who had meticulously planned her destruction from the very beginning. The Cartier jewelry, the late nights, the interest in her father's finances, it all clicked into place, forming a terrifying mosaic of deceit. Her grief morphed into a burning, righteous fury. He thought she was predictable, fragile, emotional. He had no idea who he was dealing with. He had underestimated Serafina Vanderbilt Thorne, and he was about to find out just how catastrophically wrong he was. The game wasn't over. It had just begun, and she, armed with his own damning words, was about to change all the rules. The initial shock gave way to a chilling clarity. Julian hadn't just betrayed her. He had declared war on her family, on everything she held dear. And the most horrifying weapon in his arsenal was an innocent, unborn child. Serafina didn't sleep that night. Fueled by coffee and a steely resolve, she watched the damning segment of the recording over and over, dissecting every word, every nuance of Julian's monstrous plan. The mention of the prenup clauses, the insinuation about her father's health, the plot to paint her as unstable, and above all the cold calculation regarding their baby. It was a symphony of malice. By sunrise, Serafina had a plan. Julian thought her predictable. She would be anything but. He expected tears and lawyers focused on divorce. He would get a strategist ready for battle on all fronts. Her first call was not to a divorce lawyer, but to Myron Glass, her father's oldest friend and the most formidable corporate litigator in New York City. Myron was a legend, a shark in a Savile Row suit, fiercely loyal to the Vanderbilt family. He'd been skeptical of Julian from the start, his polite congratulations at the wedding barely concealing a deep-seated unease. "Serafina, my dear girl." Myron's gravelly voice answered, betraying surprise at her early call. "Is everything all right?" "Myron," Serafina said, her voice calm but firm. "I need to see you. Today. It's urgent. And it's about Julian." An hour later, Serafina was sitting in Myron Glass's Art Deco office overlooking Bryant Park. She laid out the entire story from her initial suspicions to the scene in St. Moritz, and finally the horrifying contents of the hidden camera footage. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She presented the facts with a cold, hard precision that impressed even Myron. When she was done, she played the crucial audio segment from the recording. Myron listened, his expression growing grimmer with each word Julian spoke. By the end, his face was a mask of controlled fury. "The unmitigated gall of that parasite!" Myron finally growled, his knuckles white as he gripped a pen. "To target your father, to use an unborn child. This is beyond despicable, Serafina. This is warfare." "I know," Serafina replied. "He thinks I'll crumble. He thinks I'm weak. He's counting on it. Then we shall ensure he is catastrophically disappointed." Myron said, his eyes glinting with a predatory light. "First things first, this recording. It's gold, but its admissibility in court can be tricky depending on the jurisdiction of recording and intent. However, as leverage, it's dynamite. Does he know you have it?" "No, he thinks I just walked in on an affair." "Good. Keep it that way for now. Let him believe he still holds the advantage of surprise with his narrative." Myron steepled his fingers. "His plan has several prongs discrediting you. Manipulating your father, using the child for financial leverage, and exploiting supposed loopholes in the prenup. We need to counter each one silently and effectively." Myron's mind was already working at lightning speed. "The prenup. I remember it. Your father and I practically begged you to let us tighten it. Julian's charm was potent then. But even so, diminished capacity and legitimate heirs are not magic wands he can just wave. We need to review every word of that document immediately." He then turned to the matter of her father, Arthur Vanderbilt. "Your father's health. Julian mentioned it. Has he been more involved in Arthur's medical care recently? Any new doctors Julian recommended? Any changes in medication or routine?" Serafina frowned. "Now that you mention it, Julian did introduce a new specialist a few months ago. Dr. Alistair Finch. He said Finch was renowned for geriatric neurological health. Dad's been more forgetful lately. We all put it down to his age, the stress of the business." A horrifying thought began to dawn on her. "You don't think Julian would—" "With what I've just heard, I wouldn't put anything past him," Myron said grimly. "We need to get your father a thorough, independent medical evaluation immediately, and we need to look into this Dr. Finch. Background check credentials, any connection to Julian." Next to the baby. "This Chloe, who is she?" Myron asked. "I don't know her name beyond Chloe. Red hair, maybe late 20s, early 30s. We need to identify her. A private investigator. The best. Discretion is paramount. We need to know everything about her. Is she a willing accomplice, a victim herself, or just a greedy fool? Her motivations could be crucial." Myron leaned forward. "Serafina, this is going to be a nasty fight. Julian will try to paint you as vindictive, unstable, exactly as he planned. He'll use the media if he thinks it will help him. We need to be prepared for that. But we have a powerful weapon he doesn't know about the truth and his own voice condemning him." Over the next few days, Serafina, guided by Myron, began to build her counter-offensive. They assembled a tight-knit war council. 1. Myron Glass, the legal mastermind coordinating strategy. 2. Beatrice Serafina's loyal friend, tasked with discreetly gathering social intelligence and leveraging her family's extensive network. If Chloe was anyone in their circles, or even on the fringes, Beatrice would find out. 3. Mr. Davies. The ex-MI6 head of security, now in charge of physical security for Serafina and her father, and for deploying a top-tier private investigative team to delve into Julian's finances, Dr. Finch and Chloe. 4. Dr. Lena Hansen, a renowned neurologist and old family friend of the Vanderbilts, brought in to conduct a comprehensive and discreet evaluation of Arthur Vanderbilt's health. 5. A forensic accountant, to meticulously comb through Julian's transactions and any joint accounts looking for irregularities or suspicious movements of funds, particularly anything related to the Vanderbilt portfolio he'd had access to. Serafina herself transformed. The grief was still there, a cold stone in her chest, but it was now overlaid with a white-hot anger and a fierce determination. She compartmentalized her pain, focusing on the tasks at hand. She reviewed financial statements until her eyes burned, listened to Myron's legal explanations with rapt attention, and provided the PI team with every piece of information she could recall about Julian's habits, his contacts, his routines. One evening, Beatrice came to the townhouse, her expression a mixture of triumph and disgust. "I think I found her," she announced, holding up her tablet. Chloe Masters, aspiring actress model, more accurately a regular on the social climber circuit. She's been seen at a few parties Julian attended solo over the last year. Definitely his type. Ambitious, pretty, and probably easily dazzled by someone like Julian. The tablet showed a picture of the redhead from St. Moritz, smiling brightly at a gallery opening. The Gallery Sotheby's. It was an event Serafina had missed due to a charity commitment. Julian had gone alone. The pieces were fitting together. Julian hadn't just stumbled into an affair. He had cultivated Chloe, likely promising her the world, all while plotting to destroy Serafina and seize control of her family's fortune. Meanwhile, Dr. Hansen's preliminary report on Arthur Vanderbilt was deeply concerning. While his age was a factor in his recent cognitive decline, Dr. Hansen found traces of a medication in his system that was not on his prescribed list, a sedative that, when combined with his existing heart medication, could exacerbate confusion and memory loss. She couldn't definitively say who administered it, but the implications were terrifying. Dr. Finch, the specialist Julian had recommended, was proving elusive, his credentials appearing legitimate, but his practice strangely difficult to pin down. The hidden camera recording was Serafina's ace in the hole, but Myron advised holding it back, waiting for the perfect moment. Julian needed to walk deeper into his own trap. A week after her return from St. Moritz, Julian finally called Serafina. His tone was a carefully crafted blend of contrition and concern. "Serafina, darling, we need to talk. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. What you saw, it was a terrible mistake, a moment of madness. I've been under so much pressure. Please let me explain. Let me make it right." Serafina listened, her hand gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles were white. The urge to scream the vile words from the recording at him was almost overwhelming. But she remembered Myron's advice. Let him dig his own grave. "Julian," she said, her voice cool and distant, "I'm not ready to talk about us. I'm staying at grandmother's. I need some space." Of course," he said, a hint of frustration seeping through his feigned understanding. "But your father, he's been asking for you. He's worried, and I'm worried about him too. He seems more fragile these days." The veiled threat, the casual mention of her father's health, sent a shiver down her spine. He was already starting to lay the groundwork for his narrative. "I'll see my father when I'm ready," Serafina said. "Don't contact me again, Julian. My lawyer will be in touch." She hung up, her heart pounding. The storm was gathering. Julian was making his moves, but he had no idea that Serafina was no longer the sheltered heiress he thought he'd married. She was a Vanderbilt, and she was ready to fight for her legacy, her family, and her life. The evidence was mounting, the team was in place, and Julian Thorne was about to learn a very hard lesson about underestimating a woman scorned, especially one with the truth on her side. Julian didn't wait long to escalate. A few days after Serafina's curt phone call, Myron Glass received a letter from a prestigious law firm, Thorne and Associates. No relation to Julian, ironically, but known for their aggressive tactics in high-stakes divorces. The letter was a masterpiece of sanctimonious concern and veiled threats. It spoke of Julian's deep regret over the unfortunate incident in St. Moritz, which he attributed to immense marital stress, and Serafina's increasing emotional distance and preoccupation with her father's affairs over their own marriage. It then smoothly transitioned to Julian's grave concerns for Serafina's current emotional state, and even her rational capacity, subtly suggesting she might be overwhelmed and not acting in her own best interests. The most audacious part was the proposal for reconciliation, which came with heavy conditions. Serafina was to agree to joint therapy with a therapist of Julian's choosing naturally, grant Julian more significant formal control over certain Vanderbilt family trusts for their mutual benefit and to ease the burden on her clearly strained father, and most chillingly agree to a post-nuptial agreement that would in essence supersede and weaken the original prenup, especially concerning any future offspring conceived during the marriage. "The nerve of this man is breathtaking," Myron declared, pacing his office as Serafina read the letter with a stony expression. "He's fast-tracking his plan. He wants to get you to sign away your rights while painting you as unstable if you refuse. And the future offspring clause. He's clearly referring to Chloe's baby, trying to legitimize it by implication within your marriage before the divorce gets ugly. He's also trying to isolate me from my father." Serafina observed, her voice tight. The language about Dad being strained and needing Julian to ease his burden is a clear power play. Mr. Davies's investigative team had been working tirelessly. They discovered that Dr. Alistair Finch, the neurologist Julian recommended for Arthur Vanderbilt, had a somewhat murky past. While his credentials were real, he had a history of being associated with controversial wellness clinics that bordered on quackery and, more alarmingly, had faced lawsuits in other states for prescribing inappropriate medications to elderly wealthy patients. The PIs also found evidence of significant payments from an offshore account linked to Julian into an account held by Finch just weeks before Finch began treating Arthur. This was the smoking gun they needed regarding Arthur's medical situation. Under Dr. Hansen's discreet care, Arthur Vanderbilt was slowly being weaned off the suspicious sedative. His mind was already clearing his old sharpness, returning much to Serafina's relief, though he was still frail. He was, however, furious when Serafina and Myron gently explained the situation with Julian and Dr. Finch. The old lion, though weakened, was not yet declawed. "That young pup," Arthur rasped, his eyes blazing with anger from his favorite armchair in the Vanderbilt Mansion's library. "I gave him my trust. I treated him like a son. And he repays me by trying to drug me into incompetence and steal from my daughter." His voice, though thready, held the iron will that had built an empire. "Serafina Myron, You do whatever it takes. Destroy him. Protect our family. Protect our name." His blessing was a powerful fuel to Serafina's resolve. Meanwhile, Beatrice's inquiries into Chloe Masters painted a clearer picture. Chloe was indeed an aspiring actress with a string of minor roles and a larger reputation for attaching herself to wealthy, influential men. She had significant debts and seemed desperate for a life of luxury. Julian had likely promised her marriage a stake in the Vanderbilt fortune and legitimacy for their child. The PIs also discovered that Chloe had recently made several large cash deposits into her bank account, the source untraceable, but the timing coinciding with the early stages of her pregnancy. Julian was funding her, keeping her on a leash. The forensic accountants, too, were unearthing a disturbing pattern. Julian had been subtly siphoning funds from accounts he managed, small amounts initially, then larger ones, rerouting them through a complex web of shell corporations. He was also found to have leveraged certain Vanderbilt assets for personal investments, taking risks that could have been catastrophic, all without proper authorization. It wasn't just an affair. It was grand larceny fraud on a massive scale. He wasn't just trying to secure a future inheritance. He was actively plundering the present. Serafina knew it was time to face Julian, but on her terms. Myron advised a strategic confrontation. "We don't reveal the recording yet," he cautioned. "Let him believe he's still in control of the narrative. We present him with some of the financial and medical evidence. See how he reacts. See if he incriminates himself further." The meeting was set for Myron Glass's office. Neutral territory, but one where Serafina felt empowered. Julian arrived with his lawyer, radiating a carefully rehearsed aura of pained sincerity. Serafina, flanked by Myron, was the picture of cool composure. "Serafina, darling," Julian began, his voice dripping with false concern, ignoring Myron. "I'm so glad you agreed to meet. I've been worried sick about you. About us." "Save it, Julian." Serafina cut him off, her voice like ice. "I'm not here to discuss us. I'm here to discuss your systematic attempts to defraud my family and endanger my father." Julian's eyes widened slightly, his mask slipping for a fraction of a second before his lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Marcus Thorne. No relation, a point of some irony Julian often enjoyed pointing out, stepped in. "Mrs. Thorne," Marcus said smoothly. "These are very serious and unfounded allegations. Mr. Thorne has always acted in the best interests of your family, often stepping in to manage complex affairs that were clearly overwhelming for others." Myron Glass leaned forward. "Overwhelming, or perhaps deliberately obfuscated. We have evidence, Mr. Thorne, of your client recommending a Dr. Alistair Finch to care for Arthur Vanderbilt, a doctor whose treatments included unprescribed sedatives that worsened Mr. Vanderbilt's condition. We also have evidence of significant undisclosed payments from your client to Dr. Finch." Julian paled visibly. That's a ridiculous assertion. Dr. Finch is a respected professional. I was merely trying to help Arthur get the best care and the financial irregularities. Serafina pressed her gaze unwavering. The unauthorized leveraging of Vanderbilt assets. The funds moved to offshore accounts. Julian scoffed, attempting to regain his composure. Standard financial planning, diversification. Things you wouldn't understand, Serafina. You were always too emotional for business. There it was, the narrative he was trying to build. The condescension. Emotional. Serafina's voice was dangerously quiet. Or perhaps just less inclined to criminal activity. Marcus Thorne intervened again. My client will not be subjected to these baseless attacks. If you have concrete proof of any wrongdoing, present it through the proper legal channels. Otherwise, this meeting is over." "Oh, we will," Myron assured him, a grim smile on his face. "Consider this your informal notification. We know about Dr. Finch. We know about the financial malfeasance. And we know about Chloe Masters and her condition." At the mention of Chloe, Julian flinched. He hadn't expected them to know her name or about the pregnancy so soon. "Chloe is a private matter." Julian snapped, his composure finally cracking. "A mistake I deeply regret. It has no bearing on my concern for Serafina or her father." "Doesn't it?" Serafina asked softly, holding his gaze. "Or is she and her baby part of your long-term strategy for the Vanderbilt fortune?" Julian looked shaken. He clearly hadn't anticipated this level of preparedness. He exchanged a nervous glance with his lawyer. "We are leaving," Marcus Thorne announced abruptly, rising to his feet. "Any further communication will be between legal counsel." Julian stood, his eyes darting toward Serafina, a new uncertain expression replacing his earlier arrogance. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it, turning to follow his lawyer out. As the door closed behind them, Serafina let out a shaky breath. "He's rattled." "Indeed," Myron agreed. "But he's not broken. He'll fight back, and he'll fight dirty. He still believes he can control the narrative about you, and he still has the pregnancy as what he thinks is his trump card." "He doesn't know my trump card is his own voice," Serafina said, a grim satisfaction in her tone. The first skirmish was over. Serafina had drawn first blood, showing Julian she was not the fragile, emotional wreck he had envisioned. She had a shield of evidence, a council of war, and the unwavering support of her father. But Julian was a cornered animal, and cornered animals were dangerous. The real battle, the one where the hidden camera footage would finally be deployed, was yet to come. And Serafina knew she had to be ready for anything. Julian's counterattack was swift and insidious. Within days, whispers began to circulate through New York's elite social circles. Carefully planted rumors about Serafina's erratic behavior, her emotional instability, following the amicable though painful separation from Julian. Anonymous sources, likely fed by Julian's PR team, hinted to gossip columnists about Serafina being unduly influenced by aggressive lawyers and a controlling father, and that Julian was deeply concerned for her well-being. He was trying to discredit her before she could make any public move, painting himself as the wronged, worried husband. He even gave a carefully worded interview to a prominent financial magazine, ostensibly about market trends, but skillfully weaving in comments about the importance of family stability and his commitment to philanthropic efforts, started with the Vanderbilts, subtly positioning himself as a responsible custodian of their legacy. "He's good," Beatrice conceded grimly, showing Serafina the latest online gossip piece. "He's laying the groundwork to make you look like a hysterical, vengeful wife if you accuse him." "Let him," Serafina said, her resolve hardening. "He's playing checkers. We're playing chess." Myron Glass agreed. "His public posturing is a sign of desperation. He knows we have something on him regarding Finch and the finances. He's trying to preemptively poison the well. It's time to deploy our queen." The queen, of course, was the hidden camera recording. Myron's team had been working on the legalities. While a secret recording's admissibility in a divorce court could be complex, its use in a criminal investigation for fraud and conspiracy was another matter. They had also confirmed that St. Moritz, Switzerland, had one-party consent laws for recording conversations in many circumstances, which could strengthen their position. regardless its power, as leverage was undeniable. The plan was multi-pronged. First, they would confront Julian directly with the recording. Second, armed with the financial evidence and the information about Dr. Finch Myron, would file a comprehensive civil suit against Julian for fraud, mismanagement of assets, and undue influence. Simultaneously, he would present a dossier to the district attorney's office, including the medical reports on Arthur Vanderbilt and the suspicious payments to Dr. Finch, urging a criminal investigation. But there was one more piece to the puzzle, Chloe Masters. The PIs had continued to monitor her. She was living in a luxury apartment Julian was leasing for her, but she appeared increasingly isolated and anxious. Her social media, once vibrant, had become sparse. She was a pawn in Julian's game, but perhaps a pawn that could be turned. Serafina, against Myron's initial reservations, decided she wanted to speak to Chloe herself. She needs to know what kind of man Julian really is, Serafina argued. She needs to understand he's using her and their child just as callously as he used me. Maybe she can be convinced to cooperate, for her own sake and for her baby's. Beatrice, using her social connections, managed to arrange an accidental encounter. Chloe was a known regular at a particular high-end salon in Soho. Serafina, looking poised and elegant in a Chanel suit that screamed quiet power, approached Chloe as she was having her hair done. Chloe Masters visibly paled when she saw Serafina. "Mrs. Thorne," she stammered, nearly dropping her phone. "Ms. Masters," Serafina said calmly. "May I have a word with you privately?" The salon owner, sensing drama and perhaps a hefty tip from Beatrice, who had prearranged this, quickly ushered them into a private room. Chloe was trembling. "Look what happened in St. Moritz. I'm so sorry. Julian, he told me you were practically separated." "Julian tells many stories, Chloe," Serafina said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Most of them are lies. He's lying to you just as he lied to me." She then, without malice but with brutal honesty, laid out the truth about Julian, his financial crimes, his deliberate endangerment of her father, and most importantly, what he had said about Chloe and the baby on the hidden camera. She didn't have the recording with her, but she quoted him verbatim. "The baby, my sweet, isn't just a baby. It's our golden ticket. It's the key to unlocking everything I'm owed." As Serafina spoke, Chloe's face went from scared to shocked, then to a look of dawning horror and betrayal. Tears welled in her eyes. He said that," Chloe whispered, her voice cracking. "He told me he loved me. He told me we'd have a family, that he wanted this baby more than anything." "Julian wants what the baby can get him," Serafina corrected softly. "Control, money, leverage. You, Chloe, are a means to an end for him. Once he has what he wants, or if you become inconvenient, he will discard you without a second thought, just like he was prepared to discard me." Serafina leaned forward. "I'm not here to threaten you, Chloe. I'm here to offer you a choice. You can continue to be Julian's pawn, tied to a man who is very likely going to prison and face the consequences with him. Or you can think about your future and your child's future. You can cooperate. Tell us what you know about Julian's plans. His hidden assets, anything that can help bring him to justice. In return, Myron Glass, my lawyer, can discuss a potential immunity agreement with the DA, should it come to that. We can ensure you and your baby are protected, not financially enriched, but safe." Chloe was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know how deep it went. He can be so charming, so persuasive. He said he was protecting his assets from a vindictive wife." "I am many things now, Chloe," Serafina said. "Angry, yes. Determined, absolutely, but not vindictive without cause. He's a predator, and he's counting on us fighting each other instead of him." She paused, then added, "He also mentioned something about questioning the baby's paternity if it suited him, just so you know the kind of man you're dealing with." That last barb hit home. Chloe's head snapped up, a new fierce anger in her eyes. "He wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't he?" Serafina countered. "He's trying to have my father declared incompetent and me mentally unstable. Questioning paternity to suit his narrative would be child's play for him." Serafina left Chloe with Myron Glass's card and a lot to think about. The next day, the formal confrontation with Julian took place. He swaggered into Myron's conference room, his lawyer, Marcus Thorne, at his side, clearly expecting another round of accusations he could deny. This time, however, Serafina had a large monitor set up. "Julian," Myron began, his voice like granite. "We have tried to settle this matter with a degree of civility, despite your egregious actions. You have responded with denials and a smear campaign against your wife. It seems you are incapable of recognizing the gravity of your situation." "My situation?" Julian scoffed. "I believe it is Serafina who is in a precarious situation, emotionally speaking." "Is that so?" Serafina said, her voice deathly calm. "Julian, do you remember what you said in the St. Moritz chalet after I left, when you thought you were alone with Chloe Masters?" A flicker of unease crossed Julian's face. "I remember comforting a distressed young woman after your dramatic entrance." "Let me refresh your memory," Serafina said, nodding to Myron's paralegal, who hit play. Myron Glass laid a thick file on the table. "This is a copy of the civil suit we are filing today, Mr. Thorne. It details your fraudulent activities, the conspiracy with Dr. Finch, and the clear intent to defraud Mrs. Thorne and her father. This recording, along with other evidence, will be submitted." He placed another, slimmer file next to it. "And this is a summary of the information being presented to the district attorney's office, urging a criminal investigation. Forgery, conspiracy, elder abuse. The list is quite extensive." Marcus Thorne finally found his voice, though it was hoarse. "Myron, Serafina, perhaps we can discuss a settlement. A very generous one." Julian looked wildly at his lawyer. "Marcus, what are you saying?" "I'm saying, Julian," Marcus hissed, "that you are, to put it mildly, royally screwed. And you clearly lied to me, your counsel." The fallout from the revelation of the hidden camera footage was immediate and catastrophic for Julian Thorne. His world, so carefully constructed on lies and manipulation, imploded with spectacular speed. Marcus Thorne. Julian's lawyer, visibly furious at being deceived by his own client, immediately moved to formally withdraw as counsel, citing irreconcilable differences and a fundamental breakdown of trust. This left Julian scrambling to find new representation, a task made infinitely harder, as word of the damning recording and Chloe Masters' cooperation began to leak, albeit discreetly, through legal circles. Few reputable firms wanted to touch such a toxic case, especially against the formidable Vanderbilt legal team led by Myron Glass. The civil suit Myron filed was a bombshell detailing Julian's calculated fraud, his siphoning of Vanderbilt funds, the conspiracy with Dr. Finch to manipulate Arthur Vanderbilt's health, and the emotional distress inflicted upon Serafina. The suit sought not only the return of all misappropriated assets, but also substantial punitive damages. Crucially, it petitioned for an immediate injunction to freeze all of Julian's known assets, domestic and international, to prevent him from hiding or further squandering them. The district attorney's office, armed with Chloe's sworn statement, the preliminary findings from Dr. Hansen, the forensic accounting reports, and most damningly the St. Moritz recording, moved with surprising swiftness. A criminal investigation was launched. Julian found himself facing potential charges ranging from grand larceny and multiple counts of fraud to conspiracy and elder abuse. The prospect of prison, once a remote theoretical possibility, became terrifyingly real. Julian's carefully crafted public image shattered. The gossip columns once fed his narrative of a concerned husband now feasted on the lurid details of his downfall. Headlines screamed about the millionaire cad, the serpent in a suit, and the hidden camera that toppled an empire. His business associates distanced themselves. Partnerships dissolved and invitations dried up. The St. Moritz chalet became infamous, a symbol of his duplicity. Even the Cartier boutique, where he'd bought jewelry for Chloe, likely found its name unintentionally dragged into the sordid affair in hushed whispers of high society. For Serafina, it was a strange, surreal period. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing justice begin to unfold, but no joy. The depth of Julian's betrayal had carved a permanent scar. Her focus remained on her father, whose health and spirits were slowly improving now that he was free from Dr. Finch's influence and Julian's oppressive presence. Arthur Vanderbilt, though still physically frail, attended strategy meetings with Myron and Serafina, his mind sharp, his input invaluable, especially in untangling the complex financial webs Julian had woven. The legal battles were complex and drawn out, but the weight of evidence against Julian was overwhelming. The recording was authenticated by forensic experts. Financial trails meticulously uncovered by the accounting team led directly to Julian's illicit activities. Dr. Finch, facing his own investigation and the loss of his medical license, quickly agreed to testify against Julian in exchange for a plea deal. Months later, the first major legal victory came. The civil court ruled decisively in Serafina's favor. The judge, citing the shocking and morally reprehensible nature of Julian's actions, awarded Serafina the full amount of misappropriated funds, plus significant punitive damages that effectively wiped out Julian's personal fortune. The prenuptial agreement was upheld in its original form, offering Julian no escape route there. His attempts to claim diminished capacity on Serafina's part were laughed out of court. The criminal proceedings took longer, but the outcome was equally devastating for Julian. Faced with irrefutable evidence and a parade of witnesses, including his former mistress and the doctor he'd conspired with, Julian Thorne was found guilty on multiple counts. The judge in sentencing spoke of Julian's predatory exploitation of trust and the callous disregard for human decency. Julian Thorne, the man who had once graced the covers of society magazines and commanded boardrooms, was sentenced to a substantial prison term. As he was led away in handcuffs, his face was a mask of stunned disbelief, the final public unraveling of a man who believed himself invincible. Serafina was not in court for the sentencing. She was with her father at their sprawling Hamptons estate, the ocean breeze rustling the leaves a world away from the stifling courtroom. Myron called her with the news. She listened quietly, a sense of profound weariness washing over her, but also a quiet sense of closure. The empire Julian had tried to steal was secure. Her family's name, though bruised by the scandal, would recover its foundations of integrity, ultimately proving stronger than Julian's deceit. As for the baby, Chloe Masters gave birth to a healthy boy. Serafina, true to her word, ensured through anonymous channels that the child would not want for necessities, though she kept her distance. The child was an innocent in all of this, a life Julian had intended to use as a pawn, now free to grow up untainted by his schemes. Chloe, having served a short sentence for her lesser role in the financial misdeeds and having cooperated fully, was attempting to rebuild her life, humbled and forever changed by the experience. Serafina Vanderbilt. Thorn had walked through fire. She had faced betrayal in its ugliest forms. Her trust shattered, her life upended. But she had emerged not broken, but forged anew, stronger, wiser, and more fiercely protective of what was truly important. She had learned the painful lesson that gilded cages could hide the most venomous of serpents, but also that truth armed with courage was the most powerful weapon of all. The hidden camera had caught what Julian said about the baby, and in doing so had not just exposed a villain, but had also, in a strange, indirect way, set Serafina free to reclaim her life and her legacy. Serafina's story is a chilling reminder that betrayal can lurk beneath the most glittering surfaces, and that the deepest wounds often come from those we trust the most. But it's also a testament to resilience, the strength found in fighting back against injustice, and the power of truth, even when it's captured by a tiny hidden lens. Julian thought he could manipulate everyone, but he underestimated Serafina's resolve and the devastating impact of his own words about an innocent baby. Justice in the end prevailed,